I have a love-hate relationship with 8-bit Sonic games. From 1991 to 1996, the Blue Hedgehog found unexpected success in this niche of 8-bit video games. Released on the Sega Master System and later its portable version, the Game Gear, a whole bunch of loose ports and original titles would be published, and Sega reached in every direction for companies to develop them. This, of course, meant that their levels of enjoyability and polish would highly vary between each release. You'd get your astonishingly entertaining titles such as Sonic 1 and Tails Adventures, to name a few, and others like the middling Sonic Chaos and Sonic 2, which made me want to tear my hair out. Clearly, this unique side canon of titles released alongside their Mega Drive counterparts had an audience, regardless of the obscenely loud and compressed logo sound. Whether they were the Chads who owned physical copies back in the day, or if you played them later on the various modern day compilations, releases on these two consoles were so versatile, so curiously differing in quality that at least one of them could end up as someone's favourite game and open them up to the greater franchise as a whole. You could play Sonic Treble Trouble and see Fang the Sniper for the first time, and then whenever you play later games or read supplementary comics, you now know this character and their whole deal. Let's see what else this speedy blue guy has in store. However, all of these 8-bit games have already been covered in this series of retrospectives. I've knocked out a weasel, fallen from high peaks and gimmicky hang gliders, and thrown more than enough bombs at army birds. So join me as I talk about not the final 8-bit game in the history of Sonic, but the last two that came out on the Sega Game Gear. We've come a long way, so buckle up ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, and tuck yourself into a ball and roll around a golf course. Time to get the ball rolling with this one. Out of all the games in the Sonic franchise, Sonic Labyrinth, no relation to Labyrinth Zone from the first game, probably has the most unorthodox gameplay. Instead of being a 2D platformer, this one is more of a puzzle-based board roller, for a lack of a better term, with an overhead isometric perspective. Your main method of traversal is rolling into a ball, spin dashing your way past or into hazards and walls, and avoiding falling into pits because that's a life lost. Barring Sonic Spinball, which was the traditional pinball gimmick in the 2D games expanded into an entire game, Sonic Labyrinth is basically that style of pinball gameplay from a different point of view, if the American and Japanese box art isn't obvious enough. Speaking of, the box art's alright. Still got that breezy airbrush art style, and it lets you know exactly what you're in for. Once again drawn up by the late Greg Martin, the box art for this game is generally similar between regions, save for the European one which emulates the title screen, and the curious difference between each of them is the typography of the game title. Each one has their own thing going on, though oddly none of them match the actual in-game title screen text. Sega would get the ball rolling with Sonic Labyrinth by bringing in Minato Giken, a company who developed a fair number of Game Gear exclusive titles, including an often overlooked port of Dynamite Headdy. When I first saw the gameplay of this peculiar Sonic game, my first thought was Kirby's Dream Course for the Super Nintendo of all things, released a year or two prior. But most likely the team were inspired by Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, the arcade game, or, more likely, Marble Madness with its minimalist, grid-based aesthetic and how you guide a little guy over floating boards and slopes under a time limit. Marble Madness was released 11 years before Sonic Labyrinth was even developed, the game in question finishing production and releasing first in the UK on October 1995, with a November release for all other regions. Not sure exactly why they'd want to merge Sonic gameplay with a ball-based puzzle game from the 80s, maybe it was just that hot at the time. I recall seeing variations of the Marble game continue into the 2000s, so its fans must have been thriving on Windows. But let's move on from games not about our favourite blue lad, and dissect Sonic Labyrinth's gameplay and unique elements. There's no shortage of experimental Sonic games, and that could be said for just about any moment in the franchise. Though, on that note, if you enjoy me talking about retro games and rambling for like an hour, please consider liking, commenting, and hitting subscribe. It's a big help, and I thank you for your time. Oh shit! Whoa, slow down, Sonic! He's got the bloody zoomies. Title screen's fairly nice, the shifting colours and a peculiar road stretching off into nowhere add an overall psychedelic vibe. The pixel art of Sonic is perhaps the most detailed we've seen him. That is when he's not rolling to and from the archway every few seconds. Like, I know you're excited, little guy. Okay, let's just go. Oh, bugger. He died and went to heaven. The greater focus on spin dashing is befitting, because in gameplay that's your best method of travel in these obstacle courses. It's a very backwards way of playing as Sonic, the super fast speedy boy with his super fast shoes. Can you imagine this being the case in 2D games where you could only move through spin dashes? That would be rather cumbersome, actually. While interesting in concept, it is not exactly fun when in a rush and with this limited field of vision. Like, at least others of this genre had a more zoomed out POV going for it. Here, you're more likely to miss your mark and bounce into peril, unless you take it nice and slow like I did for most of my gameplay. Although expect to hear that screeching to a halt sound very, very often. When preparing your roll, there's an alternating number of arrows that appear above your head. The more arrows, the stronger and more uncontrollable the launch. And you can adjust your aim whenever, though you are still vulnerable to collision damage. You can walk on your two legs, but Sonic moves at an extremely sluggish pace, except when going left or right for some reason, so it's not advised to do this unless you're waltzing towards an item or spring nearby. There actually is a story reason for Sonic's lack of speed in this game, and both manuals have the same basic outline. Eggman snuck into Sonic's house and had his shoes replaced with slow-down boots to try and sabotage his nemesis so he can't run fast or jump. Robotnik didn't think his rolling into a ball moves would still work, and his new fortress on South Island, the Super Labyrinth, just happens to be built like an endless pinball obstacle course. Go nuts, Sonic. While simplistic as usual, this outline of the plot does lead to some curious questions. How does Robotnik know where Sonic sleeps? I don't know. What does the giant labyrinth's exterior look like? I don't know. What does the hedgehog look like without his shoes on? I think I might know. Other than that, there's no real reason to detail the slight differences this video, although it should be noted that the Japanese one mentions Tails being off on his own little trip, which may or may not be referencing Tails' Sky Patrol, unless this is perhaps an entirely different adventure. I also really enjoy the crude yet expressive illustrations here. Both this game and Sonic Blast have these, and though I assumed they had been drawn up by Hirokazu Yasuhara due to sharing a similar style to his Sonic the Hedgehog concept art, the creator appears to just be an unknown internal Sega artist. Who put this face on me, Boot? Eggman's scanning your feet, bro. The aesthetics are perhaps even further from what you'd expect than even Tails' 8-bit side games. Sure, the checker patterned floors, spike traps, springs which now look like pancakes, and collectible rings are still a thing, the latter mainly only appearing before boss battles, and they scatter so far you can never pick another one up afterwards, so what the heck, I thought the ring physics were perfected by now. There are 4 zones in this game with 4 acts apiece, and they are aptly titled as follows: Labyrinth of the Sky, the tutorial area; Labyrinth of the Sea, imitating the ocean floor where you don't drown; Labyrinth of the Factory, land of the floating platforms over death pits; and Labyrinth of the Castle, the most trap-filled stage. Funny naming that. You'd think the more mechanical sounding stage would be the name of the last level, but I suppose when you have a theme, you gotta embrace it. Isn't that right, Sonic? Holy crap, talk about overkill. The blue lad just got punctured by lava and burnt by spikes. Maps are filled with bumpers, conveyor belts, and teleporters and the like, and to progress you need to collect 3 keys to open the big exit door in the stage. These keys could be lying on the ground or held by badniks, which always respawn, and if you get hit while you have any in your possession, they will scatter about the area, and if not picked up from their impact spots, they will walk back to where they were originally found. There is a countdown in this game, starting from either 1 minute to 3, depending on the stage, but it can be extended by getting points from rolling into badniks, when you first pick up keys, and when you collect hourglasses from the triangles. Yeah, instead of item boxes, there are these floating formations of coloured Doritos, and whichever form they had shifted into when Sonic steps over them, you get a different power-up that cannot be stacked together. Specifically, 2 blue ones give you a temporary speed up so you can run and zoom over greater distances. 2 red ones is the invincible twinkling stars, which add a seizure-inducing background flicker in most versions, same for most of the items. 3 yellow stars add 30 seconds to the timer. 3 greens make it so every enemy vanishes, although they will shortly respawn, so there's not really any point in that. And 4 pinks give you an extra life. The graphics aren't too bad for an 8-bit title, they are clearly limited by the hardware, but I cannot help but appreciate the use of complementary colours and background details, the little things that show they really committed to the distinct level aesthetics like different themed spike traps. I like the backgrounds that you can see on like the top of the map. Some of the visual effects, such as the level doorways, are just astonishingly mesmerizing. And I love that they put this giant clock that goes off after completing Zone 4-2. I know it's there to like signify a hidden achievement, but it just looks cool and sounds neat. Like they could have left this out, but the developers added it in anyway. That's not to say these brief high points elevate the gameplay. Not at all. It's a little too clunky to control. The timer can be surprisingly strict and nerve-crushing. Though that could just be my natural dislike for countdowns in these kind of games. Unless it serves a greater purpose, I don't think this feature has any right to exist other than to artificially increase difficulty. And the later levels are true to the name of the game, large twisting mazes which can have you lose a life at the drop of a hat. It doesn't help the game screen being so soddingly squished because, like, take Zone 3-3 for example. How are you supposed to reach this inaccessible area? The platforms only go one way. But you know how? You simply wait in this one spot on the other side of the board for a platform to sneak in and whisk you to a tucked away teleporter. You'd need a map on standby to brace yourself for the castle levels because there are so many winding corridors and doors which warp you between them. And you'll need to do two things in order to get a perfect score at the end. Things neither the game nor manual tells you how to open them. Believe me, I've checked. There actually are hints to their existence, it's just some vague clues left at the end of the credits. In Zone 2-3, there's a hidden doorway which can only be opened if this launcher decides to land you on this specific spot. It takes you to a sort of special stage, filled with goodies for some easy extra lives. And secondly, in the before mentioned Zone 4-2, you must have a minimum of 2 minutes left on the clock when you reach the exit. If you don't meet these two requirements, literally nothing happens. You just get a different message at the end. Our perfectionist hopes are shattered, I tell you. Also, there's a time attack mode. Wasn't sure how to segue to this. It is built like Sonic Triple Trouble's one, where you only have one map to pick from, which has been edited to have no enemies present. It's there if you want to do it, I guess, but I think I'd rather do Sonic 3's competition mode on my own. At least the music of Sonic Labyrinth is hecking jamming. They had Atsuko Iwanaga as the composer, and honestly, I like the energetic, dreamlike vibe she offers to the experience, perfectly matching the game's fanciful tone. The gameplay may be arse and drowned out by bit-crushed noise, but I still find myself bobbing to the music every now and then. My ears enjoyed absorbing everything from the level themes, that high and low pitch that plays when you go down the obnoxiously long boss tubes, the legit banger that is the credits music playing during Sonic's triumphant departure, and that silly little ditty that plays when Sonic spin dashes in front of an exit door. The enemies here are keeping the spirit of that weird feel. Their designs look like how you would remember Batniks in your head without looking closely at them, and like in Tails Sky Patrol, they have that distinct appeal to them like you'd see them in 90s anime. Boss robots are bigger than the rest and house a Chaos Emerald within each of them. Yeah, the 6 MacGuffins once again appear as collectible trinkets at the end of each themed world, and the last 2 are point-cut gemstones for some reason. Maybe the Master Emerald shrunk? None of the bad nicknames were translated for overseas audiences, but here I shall dedicate the next few minutes to my famous bestiary ramblings. Pepe is kind of a meme among parts of the fandom. It's a goofy looking guy that goes back and forth sneezing out glue. Tordidi are bird robots with rocket boosters akin to the Valkyrie badniks, only they infinitely spawn and fly forward at certain spots. Flowawa is the name of these piranha plant looking guys that are immobile but release harmful mechanized spores from their buds. Mecha Gorilla is the first boss of the game. Like all boss encounters, there are a shower of bombs around the area before it spawns in, and it is capable of teleporting and sending out its detachable grabby hands after you. Poyoyos are like little water bubbles which also just kind of shuffle about on the floor. They often move at the same time as each other. Kabudoto is a horseshoe crab badnik which really only stays on the spot, only harmful if you happen to touch it. Ototo is the name of the shark badniks which appear whenever you hop into a cannon. They act like the birds in that they just spawn constantly in a line, although hitting them can make you fall onto the floor abruptly. Takokos are somewhat threatening in that 1, they are invincible, and 2, they have 2 different attacks involving dropping oil slicks onto the ground and firing a bunch of sparks. Best avoid these guys. Yadokaka's crawl to and fro, stopping to hide in its invulnerable shell for a second whenever it turns around. Canny Pearl is the second boss, a giant enemy crab that has a projectile spitting pearls sealed behind its shell. This is its weak point. Kibabas are fanged guys rising up on poles? They can fire missiles in each of the 8 directions. Morkakas are 3 heads that dash in single file around the area and are hard to hit. They always have a key on them. Needleman is a dude hiding behind this shield with launchable spikes, only vulnerable from behind. Auroros are archer birds stationed in out-of-reach areas. They fire arrows straight forward from where they are facing. Beroros are goofy, tiny things. They frequently unleash a long tongue in front of them. Really long. Dragogos are, well, dragon necks that emerge from water. They spit out fireballs which float forward. Gabobo is the name of the traditional piranha badniks. They jump in and out of the water and cannot be destroyed. Gaikoko is a ghostly skull which spits fire. Also being unable to be killed, it mainly appears as a blue wisp, unless that's some other obstacle. Neuroro, gosh, Robotnik loves the letter O. These snakes slither back and forth, speeding up after you if you enter their patrol lines. Robototo, a toy robot badnik which spawns endlessly and self-destructs after a little while. I'm not certain if in canon this is why they were built, or if it's just a design error. And lastly, Smiley Bomb, built in the likeness of Dr. Robotnik himself. It's dressed in a night outfit, drops bombs and lowers itself momentarily after. During the second phase it's the same, except it's just a floating head with scattering laser beams. I can see where it gets its name now. While I have a fair bit of nostalgia for the game, and even when replaying there were many memories and things to note that made it stick out in the 8-bit Sonic era, both visually and with its surprisingly decent soundtrack, I shan't say the game is outstanding in any way. The gameplay can be easy with a bit of practice, but it is quite dull, and once you get past the hurdles and the looming timer, the game goes by pretty quickly. You could easily clear the thing in less than a quarter of an hour. It's that basic. Would I consider it one of the worst Sonic games ever, like what many other peeps are saying? Honestly, I don't think it deserves such a demeaning title. It's certainly somewhat more memorable in its premise and bothersome methods of navigating its mazes, but I'd call it more annoying than anything. It's honestly admirable that Sega keeps porting these to collections, regardless of the negative feedback. Chief among the games it reappeared in were Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut as an unlockable bonus game, Sonic Mega Collection Plus, as a final boss demo in Sonic Gems Collection, which was a curious choice in bonus content, the Nintendo 3DS on the Japanese eShop, and Sonic Origins Plus as of this video. Certain fans also made it more accessible and manually enhanced it, such as one ROM hack, Sonic Labyrinth GG2 SMS, to make the screen size like 25% bigger. And in IDW comics, artists would occasionally slip the rubber duck badnik in the background of panels as a joke. But other than that, the legacy of this game is pretty much forgotten. It did not make much of a lasting impact. Like the Drift games, it may not be fun in the eyes of many, but I think this title is best enjoyed and appreciated as a brief experience. In this next game, I actually have very little knowledge of it going in. Is it due to willful ignorance, or is it so bad a title that I mentally blocked it out? Say, let's dive into what many consider one of the worst Sonic games ever made. In my years as a Sonic fan on the internet, I have seen people defend some of his more shoddily released titles. Like any series, but for some reason especially the Sonic franchise, there have been its flops and games that did not resonate with audiences, though the company always seems to bounce back from them, which is honestly extraordinary. I can't think of any other series capable of redemption after some truly sour gaming experiences, except for maybe Bubsy.
Yo! Remember me?
No!
Platform games will always persist come heaven or high water. However, I hear very little praise for Sonic Blast, the final conclusive Sonic entry for the Game Gear. It was sneakily advertised in North America alongside its similarly named Genesis title, without actually showing game footage, mind you. Brazil really loved it. Tectoy made a Slapdash Master System version exclusively released there, albeit with lower graphical quality. Or maybe the console was just on its way out. This was noted to be the final Game Gear game ever released in Japan. It's hard to tell how well Sonic Blast did financially because Sega never usually detailed sales figures for this console, but the conversation is usually about its critical reception, which was damn near abysmal. People were angry at this game, calling it poorly aged, a step back, the worst handheld Sonic game ever, and after picking it up for this video, I can certainly see why, and I am inclined to agree with all of their criticisms. This was the final game developed by Aspect, the software house behind many 8-bit games on these consoles, also responsible for co-developing Skies of Arcadia, and behind some features of Super Monkey Ball 2. You know, I always assumed that the peeps at Aspect wanted Sonic Triple Trouble to be their final platforming entry, but this time around, the team were particularly inspired. All you had to do was look at Sega's competition at the time. Donkey Kong Country, released 2 years prior on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, was as groundbreaking as it was a visual spectacle in how it used pre-rendered visuals for its graphics. They were turned into tiny, crunched-up sprites, but it made for a very interesting style that endeared itself to many players. No other game on the SNES even came close to looking and sounding like this. Aspect decided to implement a similarly ambitious graphic style to Sonic Blast, a Game Gear game on a handheld console known for its slowdown issues. Either they wouldn't or couldn't, but you think they would have asked Sega to let them develop this for, say, the Mega Drive? Games like the Vectorman duology and anything Treasure ever developed proved the system could imitate the third dimension and look really cool, pushing the hardware to its limits with detailed pixel art and just having so many moving parts on the screen at once. Why this pseudo-3D technique was utilised on the 8-bit handheld console is beyond me, but it would be released on the Game Gear towards the end of 1996, November for Europe and the UK, and December for North America and Japan. Sonic 3D Blast came out a month earlier, and this was intended to be like a Game Gear equivalent, albeit a traditional 2D platformer instead of an isometric one, and with box art that proudly displays early and now incredibly dated 3-dimensional Sonic artwork against a blank, cavernous background. They couldn't bring back Martin one final time? He did do the packaging artwork for Sonic the Hedgehog Blast, another similarly named game for a Game & Watch-esque thing by Tiger Electronics, the last artwork he would ever draw up for the Blue Blur. Thank you for contributing Mohawk-style Sonic to the community, my dude. Even the Paramount movie referenced it. I've only played, like, the unlockable timed final boss battle in Sonic Gems collection, so let's finally dive into this thing and see what got peeps all riled up. Presentation-wise, I think the menus and typography are kinda cool. Makes me think of Japanese box art with how many arrows and patches of white space there are. I like them better than the zone screens, because it's absolutely jumbled with unnecessary details. These menus are actually similar to this game's own box art in Japan, and golly, who drew these characters? Because this is some badass artwork. Very sexy. Look at Robotnik. Classic Eggman has never looked better. I wonder why it was called G Sonic the Hedgehog there. Must have been for the Kids Gear brand. Not quite sure the pixelated 3D sprites hold up at all. The playable characters have stilted and choppy animations, especially when walking because that's there when they are falling. They were made bigger to guarantee their details were visible, but as a result it makes the game look more zoomed in. The camera doesn't shift forward in the direction that you're facing and the player character is firmly placed in the center of the screen. It was already a problem when Game Gear ports suffered screen crunch, but this title was made for this system, so it doesn't have any excuses for not letting you see further ahead. Level design isn't this game's strong suit either. They are one of two sorts, either super short, or filled with sodding tubes and traps that I swear are made to trip you up. The water area is filled with these really tight obstacle courses with super tiny platforms, and they are maddening. Like, take this one for instance. You are launched out here, and you have to cross over the chasm of currents without falling in, and also don't jump too high because there's another one up there that will also just waste your time, and with the screen crunch it's really hard and it's not the only time this occurs. I've drowned more times in this game than in any other one so far. So people who hate Labyrinth Zone and Chemical Plant Zone, you do not know the terror of drowning here in this slow-ass freaking... At least with Knuckles you could somewhat cheese it, but most of the last half of the game is rife with these sorts of puzzle rooms. When you happen to get hit, and you will, if you have enough rings, you only drop about 10 or 30 at a time depending on what struck you, letting you tank damage more. Wonder if this was implemented late after they realised every jump is a leap of faith. And how come Shadow the Hedgehog is the only game to bring this idea back? Despite my issues with it, there are a fair few details I appreciate, such as the way your movement kicks up dust when walking anywhere in the desert, the way some of the boss battles are designed, and there's one moment in the last level where you get chased by a spike wall. That was invigorating. In gameplay, the enhanced graphics give less of a feeling like everything has depth and more like it's muddled, overly detailed textures which fail to simulate real life. Tails Adventures had more realistic tile sets too, but that was pixel art meant to look that way because it was more grounded in its gameplay, so to speak. It is neat how the tile set was designed to give the ground a visual x-axis, but regardless, it's all in service to an 8-bit title with less nuance than even Sonic 2 on the Game Gear. Because at least in those games the levels had original aesthetics and gimmicks to look out for as you died for the 15th time. So you might be wondering why Knuckles is suddenly playable. Well, in the story, he joins the adventure because Dr. Robotnik was up to no good, fired a laser beam intending to kill Sonic in his sleep, and accidentally shattered a nearby Chaos Emerald. Holy crap, these things can break! And this won't be the first time this kind of thing happens, isn't that right, Knuckles me lad? So it's up to Sonic and Knuckles, willingly teaming up this time, to topple Robotnik's latest fortress and collect each of the 5 Emerald Shards before he acquires them, which just so happen to look like different Chaos Emeralds from Sonic 3? Were these always intended to be Chaos Emerald Shards, or was this just something changed later in development? Just saying, the pictures and the words, they do not match up. Playing as either Sonic or Knuckles, you run across South Island's 5 zones, divided into 3 acts. There's Green Hill Zone, notably lacking a checkered ground texture and having a... is that a music box version of the spiked turning logs? Yellow Desert Zone, where sand and tombs are abundant. Red Volcano Zone, the most Donkey Kong Country-esque environment. Blue Marine Zone, an Atlantis-looking set of ruins with so many tubes. And Silver Castle Zone, the Scrap Brain lookalike, although its exterior is notably Death Egg inspired. I'm noticing a colour trend with each of the level names. At the end, Dr. Robotnik is fought one final time in a game of Pong. Yeah, that's not me moving the camera. Although if you collected all the emerald pieces, you get a bonus boss fight whose defeat will lead to the good ending. There's really not any satisfaction in watching it because collecting the 5 forbidden gummies only changes from Robotnik getting away from the sinking fortress to that same cutscene without Robotnik and the player character juggling the Chaos Emerald shards, and the repeated bubbling sound effect overrides the music. Sonic and Knuckles play relatively differently, both can spin jump and spin dash, but Sonic, for instance, has the innate ability to double jump, called the Sonic Boost Blast in the manual. Imagine having the Sonic 3 lightning shield ability for the whole game, without the ring magnet. It's about as broken as it sounds. Also in the game's code, Peeps did uncover sprites of Sonic using the strike dash like in Chaos and Triple Trouble, meaning it probably would have been implemented at some point. The maps seem to be built around the Hedgehog's enhanced moveset because poor Knuckles gets the short end of the stick. Like the And Knuckles games, his jump doesn't quite reach the same height, and he can climb walls to skip some annoying set pieces and lava pits, but there's nary anything which really requires them. Perhaps they ran out of time fine-tuning the game and maps for a second player character? I never saw such downgrades in map design when playing as either Sonic or Tails beforehand. And also, can we talk about how they nerfed his glide ability? Because sodding blimey, who put rocks in his shoes? The glide has you drop near instantly after activating it, and you turn slower than molasses. Poor Knuckles just can't catch a break. Rings, air bubbles and spikes and whatnot are present as expected, with many things having less than stellar changes visually. Springs are very small, although they function like usual, launching you in a direction, and item boxes have power-ups and checkpoints in them. The shield is less of a translucent or flashing ball around the player and more like 2 sparkles in orbit around you. I think maybe there was one speed up power up in the entire game and it's in this tiny cramped area, and Robotnik monitors merely reduce your time instead of physically harming you. Drowning also works somewhat differently, that makes the game slightly more forgiving. Instead of instantly drowning once numbers count down from 5, you got one that goes down from 9, and once it reaches 0, your rings just kind of drain away at a rapid pace. It's rather scary, and it doesn't help when going through Blue Marine Zone, because look at these maps, they're bloody massive. Also notice that in the corner of the screen, the timer and lives HUD is omitted so as to not obscure the tiny frame. The timer is still present, as evidenced by the zone title cards, and if you have 30 seconds left, the game freezes as a hurry up graphic loudly zooms onto the screen, and the music changes to this frantic tune. And the graphics come in tenfold during the last 10 seconds. It's funny they went out of their way to program all this. Look alive, what's that at the end of the zone? The bonus plates appear one last time. While initially blank, when flipped it can show either Sonic or Knuckles, giving the matching character a 1-up, or the opposite character 30 rings, a ring that gives you 10 extra rings, an emerald which gives you a continue, Super Sonic rewarding you with both an extra life and 30 rings, and Dr. Robotnik does nothing. To my knowledge, unlike every other 8-bit game that included this version of the gold plate, this one actually is a random roulette on what you get at the end. Special stages are accessed by finding a giant ring in each of the non-boss acts, although the word giant may be a stretch. They're like half your height. The special stages are kind of a mix of Sonic 2 and 3 for the Mega Drive, in that you walk down a straight path and collect rings like in the tubes, with the springs, background and objects harkening back to Blue Sphere. Not much to say about them, except for the fact that the layout of each one is specific to the zone and acts they are found in, and if you don't grab enough rings, Robotnik flies in and steals your reward at the end like a bugger, and you can't get back in them, so if it's a Chaos Emerald, it's lost forever unless you restart the whole game. Special stages in Act 1 give you an extra life at the end, while ones in Act 2 give the Chaos Emerald fragment. The results screen kind of reminds me of 2000s era web pages. The soundtrack uses the same in-game instruments from Tails' Adventures, and even had the same sound composer called Jiro Mikusa, one of the few returning Aspect staff members. Like that game, the OST is more moody and emblematic of this era of handheld gaming. A lot of droning notes that I suppose could be called music, and I wouldn't say the dude did as good of a job. No track in particular stands out, except for maybe the boss music. Sonic CD had that funky, non-serious jazz funk going on, and here it's a somewhat decent follow-up of that style. Boss fights against Dr. Robotnik are back. It's been a while since he was fought in them, instead of primarily being replaced by Master Robots. They are all consciously egg-shaped, can only be damaged by hitting the glass cockpit, and most have the same tactic of doing something and then floating forward, including a full-on Journey to the West homage. Okay, this is the best thing in the game by far. Plus there's like a flickering colours graphic for when you hit the boss's weak points, which is not something I can say for all of Sonic's 8-bit games. They either have bosses flickering in and out or just nothing but a sound effect, so it's welcomed actually. The true final boss is also strangely as hard as encounters in Sonic 2 8-bit before you catch on to his attack patterns, especially with Knuckles and his shorter jump. The game gives you 99 rings and you may well end up using up all of them. Lastly, let's go over the badniks, once again not containing flickies because 8-bit consoles were allergic to them. Just about most of them are carbon copies of one seen in Sonic 2 and 3, and the design instructions for the artist must have been make them look substantially smaller and more organic. Though I do wonder why they didn't go all out in their mechanical aspects, like Sonic CD and Knuckles Chaotix. Enemies in those games were also designed first in 3D before being translated into pixel art, so I'm uncertain why they only made them big enough to bully ants. Regardless, here's a quick rundown on the enemies. Buzzers reappear, flying in a similar pattern and shooting out tiny laser projectiles. Coconuts hang onto palm trees and throw those same lasery balls down at you if you're below. Mashers are fish that jump up and down at the waterfalls, chomping away. Returning Batbots are extremely tiny and given their Japanese name, Hadalgen. They fly about and swoop down and they fly and they swoop. Sand Doom. Alright, looks like we're finally getting some original badniks now. They slide back and forth on the ground, releasing a spike from the top of their head sometimes when they stop. They're easy to run into. Goddamn collision damage. Golas, lacking the H, only have one fireball orbiting around them. Due to the screen size they are harder to avoid, but easier to defeat. Rexon's long necks emerge from lava pits, spitting out projectiles forward. Aquaspadniks look more like realistic seahorses, appearing both above water and underwater. Crabmeats have a simpler design with smaller claws. They wander back and forth. Octopuses float both in the air and underwater. They are more dangerous if you happen to bump into one from a tube. Egg sentries guard Silver Castle Zone, hovering around and firing 2 projectiles at you if you're within their range. Egg pogos hop up and down on the spot, bounding on a spring. And egg saucers are those same kinds of drones with rotating blades. They float back and forth constantly. And so, this was the last 8-bit Sonic game to come out on the Game Gear. Like most of the Hedgehog's titles on the system, critics at the time were mixed on Sonic Blast, retro reviews being particularly more negative what with more games to compare it to. There's not even any ROM hacks I could find. The only one online is Sonic Blast Remastered, and that's been inactive for about 3 years now. If not even the ROM hack scene wants to touch this thing, I think it might just be rotten. When playing it now for this video, after overlooking it for so long, I would say it is certainly a blemish on the 8-bit lineup. Because sure, difficulty just comes with the territory. These games could be annoyingly frustrating, they could be unfairly hard, but never this drably looking, repetitive, full of fake difficulty and a complete misfire with a graphic style that the staff clearly gave more attention than developing an actually good game around it. There are better pseudo 3D games during this era I could easily recommend over this, and for the first time in these retrospectives, for Sonic Blast, I'd have to say, ignore it, unless you're extremely, urgently curious. Oh hey, Supersonic's here. In terms of ranking, while mediocre yet enjoyable for a little bit, I'd give Sonic Labyrinth a D. Sonic Blast, golly, let it be rank F, below even Tails Sky Patrol. Honestly, I'd take any other Game Gear game over these two. Sonic 1 really hasn't been toppled as the best 8-bit platformer title yet. This really was quite the ride. Each Sonic game on the Master System and Game Gear was like a roller coaster, playing them one after the other and just absorbing the history. And I hope it's been a fun ride for peeps seeing me suffer and perhaps finding things to enjoy about them. Right now, I can say until later, I am finally done talking about 8-bit Sonic games. I feel like I've come out a little stronger. A little more prepared to tackle things with not just hand-drawn sprites, but something with polygons and CD quality music. What should I do a video on next? Thank you ever so much for watching, if indeed you still are, and I'll see you in the next video.